So, good morning, Simone. Thanks so much for joining us. For those that don't know, I'd like to introduce you to Simone Wiley. Simone is the CAO for the Town of Westlock. So, thanks so much for joining me this morning, Simone.
Thanks, Erica. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So we are going to chat a little bit about municipal collaboration this morning, which of course you are no stranger to. I know Transitional Solutions worked with Westlock already. Oh, I feel like it was 5 years ago when it was a while, right? When you embarked on the regional collaboration study with Westlock County and the Village of Clyde, and you were really ahead of the game there because ICFs were not really a thing yet. They certainly weren't mandated, but the town and the county and the village were forging ahead to develop that relationship. So I do know that you're no stranger to regional collaboration. So my first question to you would be, how has regional collaboration benefited the town of Westlock?
As you mentioned, the town has been working with our neighbor, Westlock County, for a long time. We have various agreements that were in place prior to. So I think regional collaboration has benefited the town for many years. I'll use our water commission as an example. We have a landfill commission. Those types of regional initiatives allow regions to do a lot more than they could ever accomplish on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. We're certainly seeing that, particularly now with COVID. I mean, it seemed like it was already starting to become difficult before COVID hit. And now COVID hits, and what we're seeing is, what I'm finding interesting is that where before it was really mostly the urbans that were having budgetary issues, now we're seeing a lot of the rurals starting to have even bigger budgetary issues because some of their tax assessments are quite big. And so one property that can't afford their taxes this year can really put a big deficit into their budget. And so I do think you're right in that it's financially, it makes a lot of sense to work together.
Absolutely. Duplication of service and expending funds literally kilometers apart to do the same thing makes no sense.
No, you're right. The amount of communities that we have worked with and seen where there's a fire hall in the town, and then about less than a kilometer down the road, right on that boundary, is another fire hall, and both servicing the same area. And I think a lot of municipalities are getting a lot better at that and recognizing that inefficiency. But the other question I have for you is really around the challenges that you've seen in regional collaboration. I know it's something that you have been working on for a long time, but I know it's never without its challenges. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen, whether it was through the regional collaboration study or through your ICF?
There's always the challenge of, especially in larger counties, I think you have pockets of people that may not even utilize a service that's being talked about. And so there has to be that kind of greater good conversation and the potential to use that service going forward. So I think that's always a challenge for especially rural elected officials in representing their people when they're being told, but I don't use that. So I don't think that, you should work with the town on that, those types of things. So I definitely see that as a challenge. And of course, there's the 4-year election cycle. That's always a challenge to regional collaboration. And we hope that administratively we have a little bit more consistency than that. But, we've been challenged with leadership challenges, both in the town and Westlock County, in CAO changes in the last 4 years. So I think that also poses a challenge too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. You spend a lot of time, and I know, Simone, you for sure spend a lot of time working with the other CAOs in the region. And so when one of those CAOs switches out, it's a little bit starting from scratch in that relationship building and educating, and there's a lot of history there, right?
Mm-hmm. And in all fairness, you need to give the other people be it a CAO or a new council member, that time to get up to speed and understand where everything's at. And they may not be like-minded and want to change something up or have something new to add, which nobody else thought of, right? So being open to those changes as well.
For sure, for sure. So I also want to talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Obviously, you've already submitted your ICF, so you've checked that box mandated by the Municipal Government Act. But I do know that the town and the county and the Village of Clyde continue to work together very collaboratively on new projects outside of that ICF. And so maybe tell me a little bit about some of the things that you guys are working on.
Signing the ICF was a little bit of a formality, if you will, for us, but it was the kickoff to, okay, we are going to work together. So it's been extremely exciting we're embarking on a regional economic development initiative right now. That was not in the town and the county's ICF. Our council's focused on core service delivery, and that's what they really looked at when they were discussing ICF. So, with the budgetary challenges that all three of us are facing, it makes a lot of sense. The three CAOs get together and we said, what can we do to help our region? And economic development is something that we don't know where the boundary lines are. And it doesn't matter whether it happens in Westlock County or it happens in the village. It's beneficial for everyone. Those people are still going to come into the town and shop or fill up with gas, those types of things. So regional active is definitely something that we collaboratively decided we need to do this, and away we go with it. So super exciting initiative for our region.
That's fantastic. And of course, the changes again to the Municipal Government Act allowing opportunities around incentives is certainly something that you want to work together as a region on as well. And from a background in private sector business and working in oil and gas, also a background in economic development, I know definitely that businesses look to move to areas that are not only financially sound decisions, but also politically sound decisions. They don't want to move to an area where there's disagreement amongst municipalities and that they're not working together. And so good on you and kudos on moving forward with that and outside of what's being mandated to do so by the province. So congratulations on that. I think that's really exciting. So Simone, I know Alberta is ahead of the game for sure when it comes to regional collaboration. We're doing work in other provinces across Canada, and certainly we use Alberta as a model in showcasing regional collaboration and the benefits of doing so. So if you could tell somebody that's just starting to think about working with their neighbors anything, if you could give them some advice on where to start, what would you tell them?
Start talking to each other. That really, it comes down to that, in my opinion. When you're not talking, nothing's going to happen. And it's baby steps, and it might be even just getting together as councils, as administration. That's the big thing, is communication. We have made great strides administratively by doing our weekly tri-CAO meeting. And it's not a huge time commitment. We literally keep it to under an hour once a week. And it facilitates so many things that can go political that don't need to. We have honest, direct conversations, and we can head off some things just by talking about it before it gets to be an issue. And then the paperwork sometimes ends up being the formality because we've talked about it so much, and we're all on the same page, and we know, and we go, oh, we better document that just for history's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So you and the other two CAOs meet weekly. That's amazing. That in itself is a model that should be showcased. Wow.
Not only us, Erica, we also include staff from within our municipalities, depending on what we put on the agenda, because we do create an agenda and send it out, and we rotate who does that on a monthly basis so that the burden's not with one municipality for the whole time. And if we're talking about regional ECDEV, for example, I bring in our Director of Development and Planning. She's heading up that for us. If we're talking about something financial, I might invite our Director of Finance that day. So we also bring in key staff because we recognize that that the Westlock County does have an interim CAO, and he wants to ensure, rightfully so, that the staff are informed of these conversations and can continue that on and inform their new CAO and those types of things.
Amazing. That's really cool. I definitely, Westlock continues to be ahead of the curve, I think, on regional collaboration. It's interesting, you talk about that and that having the agenda and planning and putting it on paper, and we're working with one region, and what they're doing is this spring, there's 3 municipalities as well, and they're getting together to do a regional strategic plan. And so it's obviously aside from their individual municipal strategic plans, but they know that they want to do things together, much like you folks are. But they don't really know where to start, and they have all these ideas, and they know there's grants out there to do some of this. And so they said, well, why don't we just sit down together and develop a strategy, a 3 or 4 year strategy on what that looks like, and how we can continue to work together, and what sort of projects or programs do we want to do, and find the money to do it. So I thought that was really quite cool. And they certainly aren't meeting on a weekly basis. So it's, I think it's amazing to see how this is evolving outside of the ICF process. And I totally understand why the province did what they did in mandating ICFs. I also think that it's been evolving around the ICF process and ahead of the ICF process. So I think that's really fantastic too.
That's a really cool initiative. Something we'll definitely talk about at our Tri-CAO meeting.
There you go. You can throw it on the agenda as an idea. So I have one last question for you, and that's around what's next. And some of the regions that we're working with have moved from ICF and from regional collaboration into regional governance and this idea around amalgamations. And I know in some regions, people hear the word amalgamation and it just makes the hairs on the back of their neck stand up. It's certainly a dirty word in some regions, but in other regions, they seem to be embracing it. So what are your thoughts on what's next? And it doesn't necessarily have to be with the region that you're in, but around the province, what do you see as being sort of that next step?
Well, just to start with our region, Erica, our councils really wanted to get the ICF done by the deadline. It was a push. We're going to do this. But what that meant was some of the agreements that we said, we know we need to talk about this further, but we don't have time to finish this discussion before April 1st. Mm-hmm. So we wrote it into the ICF that we would discuss fire service, for example. We'll begin discussing that by a certain date, end of 2021.
Okay.
So the ICF, as you mentioned, is kind of just the starting point mm-hmm. for us into what's next. And it lays out 3 or 4, we agree we need further discussion on this. We're not sure what that looks like yet or what the outcome will be, but we need to talk about it more. So for us, that's our guideline for what's next. And we've already started looking at that on emergency management and fire services. So we're pretty excited that we're going to continue on based on the ICF, and we'll meet those deadlines and hopefully have some outcome out of that. In terms of amalgamation, I don't think that's necessarily a dirty word in this region. It is something that might end up being a reality at some point. And I think not only for this region, but for others as well. There are some who have used the term have-nots. We're in the have-not region. There's other municipalities that are not in the same financial circumstance that we are, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's no magic financial savings when amalgamation occurs. I think that's definitely a misconception that there's millions of dollars to be had when municipalities amalgamate. We know that that's not the case, but it comes down to service delivery, in my opinion, what that looks like. And it's a hard discussion because I think the general public feel like maybe they're losing some representation when that happens, and especially in the rural area, right? So certainly, I think across the province, ICF requirements have forced municipalities to start talking about the services that they deliver. And I think that can only help create efficiencies across the province. Honestly, I was a little bit disappointed when they relaxed the "you shall talk about" and made it "you can talk about whatever you want." I think it would have been more beneficial if they would have stuck to the "you really do need to talk about these core service deliveries."
Yeah, I agree. I agree for sure.
Diluted it a little bit, I think, on the provincial level, but going forward, it's all only good things that can come of when you're talking about regional service delivery, forcing people to look for efficiencies. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're 100% right, Simone. It's not the magic bullet to save you a ton of money. You still have to provide the same services. And really, if you do go down the path of an amalgamation, residents to some extent are watching closer on their service level. And to some extent, I think you almost have to increase the service level a little bit to show benefit to them. One of the things that we've heard when doing stakeholder engagement on an amalgamation study is that community identity, and that loss of community identity is sometimes something that people are fearful of. But I also am seeing a shift for sure in the last 18 months, where when we were doing regional collaboration or even through the ICFs, amalgamation, it kind of was a dirty word. In fact, we were in one room where they said, we don't want to hear amalgamation. This is not an amalgamation study. Yeah. And the most recent project that we did, it wasn't an amalgamation study, but even the residents, when we did workshops and when we did those stakeholder engagement sessions, just kept talking about amalgamation. And we had to keep reminding them, it's not an amalgamation study, it's regional governance. And amalgamation is really just one form of regional governance. There's a whole spectrum of different levels of regional governance that you can look at. But it's interesting just to see that there has definitely been a shift.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's so much room for regional service delivery and doing different governance models for various services that we provide to residents.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, Simone, I don't have any other questions. Was there anything that I missed or that you were kind of hoping we'd talk about today?
No, I don't think so, Erica. I think that really covers it. I just have to say, I think this is a fantastic series to put on. I think there's a lot of learning to be had from each other. And I concur. I'm really missing in my first year as the actual TAO, not interim, really missing those engagement opportunities of being able to talk to other people, and you just don't get the same level of connection when you're doing it kind of this way, and rather than in person. So hopeful for fall of 21, maybe that will be in person, but thinking more like 2022.
With any luck. But in the meantime, we'll just keep connecting this way. And by all means, if you ever need connections or have questions, give me a call, and if I don't have the answer, then I can ask our team. And if we don't have the answer, we can certainly connect you to a whole slew of people.